He assumed she was just another black woman he could scare into silence until she entered the courtroom and brought his career crashing down. The highway was nearly deserted that night. Only a handful of vehicles passed by, their headlights reflecting off the slick, rain-soaked road. Street lamps blinked above, casting stretched shadows along the dim stretch just outside Birmingham, Alabama. It was late a little after 11 p.m., that hour when most folks just want to be in bed. Lieutenant Commander Renee Dawson had been on the road for close to 2 hours, her fingertips tapping softly on the steering wheel as she hummed along with a smooth jazz melody flowing from the car speakers. She wasn't wearing her uniform, just a plain black sweater and jeans. Her hair was tied back, nothing about her stood out, or so she believed. Then came the lights in her rear view mirror, red and blue flashing, rapidly gaining on her. Her stomach tightened not from fear, but from weary familiarity. She signaled, switched lanes, and gently rolled the car onto the shoulder. Putting it in park, she exhaled slowly and placed both hands clearly in view. Years in the military had taught her exactly what to do. A white cruiser stopped behind her. The officer inside didn't rush. When he finally stepped out, his movements said he expected control. Boots scraped the pavement as he approached with one hand on his belt, the other shining a flashlight that snapped on with a click. She tilted her head slightly, watching him through the mirror. His badge caught a sliver of light. Briggs, license and registration. No hello, no explanation. His voice was cold, rehearsed, impatient. Renee locked eyes with him in the mirror before reaching slowly for the glove box, retrieving her papers. "Was I speeding, officer?" Her tone was calm, controlled. Briggs didn't answer right away. He took her documents, held them just far enough to be irritating, and eyed her vehicle up and down. "Tail lights out," he finally said. She narrowed her eyes slightly. "That doesn't sound right." Briggs finally met her gaze. "Are you trying to argue with me?" A brief silence followed. Renee sensed the change, that subtle tension where control met defiance, and one side expected the other to fold. She'd witnessed it before, in debriefings on foreign military bases, during drills meant to equip sailors for life beyond Navy walls. She knew not to provoke, but she also knew her rights. "I'm only saying," she replied evenly. "My tail lights were inspected recently. If something's wrong, I'll take care of it. Step out of the vehicle." Briggs interrupted as if her words hadn't registered at all. Renee drew in a slow breath. Casting a glance at the sparse traffic ahead, no one around, she drummed her fingers against the steering wheel once, then reached for the door handle. "Can you tell me why?" she asked. Briggs tilted his head with a smirk. "Because I told you to." She let that hang for a moment, then unfastened her seatbelt and opened the door. The night air hit cooler than expected. She stepped out, standing with calm but deliberate posture. She wasn't there to escalate, but she wouldn't be intimidated either. Briggs backed up slightly, eyeing her. She felt him calculating, measuring how far he could go, turn around, hands on the car. This time she paused. "For what reason?" Briggs stepped in, his smirk vanishing. "You resisting?" Renee didn't budge. "No, I'm asking a question." Something flickered across his expression, irritation, amusement, maybe both. Then, without warning, he grabbed for his radio, got a driver refusing to comply. He muttered into it, then louder, "Turn around." Her heart rate rose, but her face remained composed. "Officer, let me make something clear," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I know exactly what I'm permitted to do and what you're not allowed to do." Briggs didn't like that. His jaw tightened. "You're under arrest." He barked, lunging for her wrist. Renee reacted instantly, stepping just out of reach. Under arrest for what? Briggs reached for his cuffs, for obstructing an officer. She let out a sharp breath through her nose. So that's how he played it. Her military instincts took over, heart steady, breath controlled. Even now, she understood her two options: go along quietly and fight later, or resist and risk things escalating fast. She refused to become another tragic headline. With slow, purposeful movements, she turned and placed her hands flat on the roof of the car. The metal felt cold beneath her skin. Briggs didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arms, yanked them back, and fastened the cuffs far too tight before pushing her toward his cruiser. "You're making a mistake," she murmured. Briggs gave a dry laugh, shoving her into the back seat. "Lady, I know exactly what I'm doing." But he didn't, not even close. The hard plastic seat pressed into her spine as Renee sat still, her wrists burning. She focused on her breath while the door slammed shut behind her, locking her in. Outside, Briggs strolled back to his car, muttering into the radio. She turned her eyes toward the barrier separating her from the front seat. A faint reflection stared back, collected, composed, but under the surface, something burned. She had made it through combat simulations, covert operations, and tough interrogations on foreign soil. But this was different. This was a man with authority, inebriated by control, believing he couldn't be touched. Minutes slipped by, then 5, then 10. She adjusted her wrists, testing the cuffs. Too tight, done intentionally. The driver's door opened and Briggs slid in, whistling. Well, he muttered, fastening his seatbelt. "Let's go for a little ride." She stayed silent. He shifted into drive, the car jerking forward as it rejoined the road. The red and blue lights still flashed, reflected in the mirrors, painting the highway in their glow. "You know," Briggs said after a moment, "most folks just do what I say when I tell them to get out." Renee let out another sharp breath. "And most cops don't arrest people for asking questions at a traffic stop." Briggs chuckled, shaking his head. "Lady, you must think you're important." She met his eyes through the glass. "I don't think," she said. "I know." That gave him pause just for a moment. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel, a flash of annoyance slipping through his usual arrogant expression, but he quickly masked it. "You in the military?" he asked, his voice taking on a new tone. She didn't respond. "Yeah, figured." He continued, "You've got that look like you think you're untouchable." He gave a smug grin. "Bet you figured I'd back off as soon as you played that card. Huh?" Still, she didn't speak. Briggs clicked his tongue. "What a pity," he said, shaking his head slowly. "If you'd just kept quiet, none of this would have happened." Her jaw clenched. The nerve of him, like she was the one to blame. Up ahead, the police station appeared, a low, square building of gray brick tucked beside the main road. The lot was nearly empty. Late, night bookings were slow, and for now, she seemed to be the only one there. Briggs pulled into a reserved spot just outside the entrance, shut off the engine, and looked at her through the divider. "Gotta admit," he muttered, "makes my job easier when they don't fight." Before she could reply, he was already out, slamming the door behind him. A moment later, her door swung open. "Let's move," he barked. As Renee stepped out, she shifted her wrists slightly. The cuffs dug into her skin. He hadn't loosened them one bit. Chin raised, she walked as he led her inside, past an uninterested desk sergeant, and into the booking area. The holding room smelled stale, a mix of old coffee and body odor. A metal bench lined the wall, a steel door leading to the cells behind it. Briggs unfastened the cuffs just long enough to process her fingerprints, mugshot, the entire routine. The officers at the desk barely looked up, running on autopilot. She recognized this kind of apathy, the kind that let officers like Briggs operate unchecked. Once it was done, he grabbed her wrist again, guiding her toward the cells. "Think you're clever, don't you?" he muttered. She glanced at him. "I don't need to think." His grip tightened. She'd struck a nerve. "Enjoy your stay." Briggs sneered, shoving her toward the cell. Renee steadied herself, then turned to watch as the bars slid shut between them. Briggs stood on the opposite side of the cell, his fingers tapping the bars casually before turning away. A loud click echoed as the lock engaged. Renee drew a deep breath, then eased herself down onto the bench. The cold metal seeped through her jeans, anchoring her. Just one night, that's all she needed, because Briggs truly had no clue who he'd just tangled with. The bench beneath her was hard, unyielding, and icy. She shifted her weight, gently rolling her shoulders to loosen the tension starting to build. The cell was simple 4 walls, a flickering ceiling light, and the lingering scent of sweat and bleach. She'd endured much worse places where the discomfort was the least of her concerns, where danger was constant and real. This was nothing. Still, it didn't stop the anger. From her cell, she caught muffled voices up front, officers chatting, papers rustling, a coffee mug tapping against a desk. She exhaled evenly, steady breath, steady mind. The fundamentals they drilled into her long before she ever boarded a ship. Then came the heavy boots Briggs. She recognized his stride before he even turned the corner. That same cocky rhythm, like a man who thought the rules bent for him. He showed up seconds later, arms folded, that arrogant grin still fixed in place. Comfortable, she didn't respond. He cocked his head, stepping closer to the bars. You know, if you'd just cooperated, you wouldn't be sitting in there now. A slow smile formed on her lips. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. His smirk faltered briefly, something flickered in his eyes. Irritation, doubt. He masked it quickly, scoffing as he glanced across the empty room. No one's coming for you tonight. He shrugged. Guess you've got some time to rethink that attitude. Renee stared at him, unmoved and steady. Briggs leaned a little closer. Here's the thing, he muttered, his voice lowering. People like you think the rules don't apply, that a little swagger can get you out of trouble. She let him speak, let him run his mouth. It didn't matter, he had no idea what was on the horizon, and right then, as if on cue, another officer rounded the corner, younger, probably mid-20s, wearing a standard issue uniform. The young officer stopped a few feet away, a clipboard in hand. Sergeant." His voice held a slight hesitation. "We just got a call." Briggs barely turned his head, prompting the officer to pause, shifting nervously. "I think you need to see this." Briggs scowled, cast one last glance at Renee, and walked off. She leaned back, listening closely. The voices were low, but fragments reached her ears, a mention of a lawyer, a higher-up placing a call, and questions being raised about why she was still in custody. Briggs's tone dipped, sharp and irritated. The younger officer stuttered out a reply, but whatever he said only made things worse. Then came the sound of approaching boots. Again Briggs stormed back, jaw clenched, hands balled tightly at his sides. That arrogant grin was gone. "What the hell did you pull?" Renee leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "I didn't pull anything." She tilted her head slightly, but word gets around. Some of us have friends in very high places. Briggs's expression darkened. She recognized it instantly, the dawning realization that the balance of power had shifted. He wasn't holding the reins anymore. Without a word, he spun around and walked off, muttering under his breath as he disappeared down the corridor. Renee exhaled. It wouldn't be long now, and when the truth surfaced, Briggs would come to regret every step that brought him to this moment. Morning sunlight poured through the narrow courthouse windows, casting long beams across the polished floor. The air inside was brisk, the kind of chill that burrows in if you sit still too long. Renee stood by the defense table, her stance composed, her gaze alert. No cuffs, no jumpsuit, no concrete cell, only a sharp navy blazer, a clean blouse, and a commanding presence. She wasn't alone. Beside her, her attorney Carla Whitman flipped through documents, barely glancing up as people filtered into the courtroom. Carla was precise, focused, no small talk, no wasted motion. Renee appreciated that. Then the heavy courtroom doors opened. Briggs entered, still walking like the room belonged to him. His shoulders were squared, chin held slightly high, but something had changed. His stride was stiffer now, and there was a flicker in his expression that hadn't been there before. The confidence he once had wasn't as firm. Rene met his gaze. He quickly looked away. Good. The courtroom hushed as the judge entered. Judge Alan Kirkland, a man past his prime with tired eyes, adjusted his glasses as he sat down. He got straight to business. "Let's proceed," he said, briefly scanning the case documents. The prosecutor, a man in his 50s with carefully combed hair, cleared his throat. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe the defendant, Lieutenant Commander Rene Dawson, was held without lawful cause. Additionally, new evidence suggests a repeated pattern of inappropriate conduct by the arresting officer, Sergeant Daniel Briggs." A low murmur spread across the courtroom. Briggs shifted uncomfortably, his jaw clenched. The judge looked over his glasses at him. "Sergeant Briggs, would you like to respond?" Briggs leaned forward, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, the defendant was uncooperative during what began as a routine traffic stop." But the prosecutor cut in. "Uncooperative," he repeated, lifting a folder from the table. "Lieutenant Commander Dawson has a distinguished military record. Naval Academy graduate, multiple honors, no criminal background, not even a minor citation." He looked directly at Briggs. "You're claiming that despite all this, she posed enough of a risk to justify an arrest over a faulty tail light." Briggs opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence lingered. The prosecutor continued, flipping pages. "Furthermore, an internal audit of your arrests shows an unusually high percentage of traffic stops involving black drivers in this jurisdiction." The murmuring in the courtroom grew louder. Briggs's face turned a deeper shade. Judge Kirkland let out a long sigh, placing the case file on the bench. "Sergeant, I don't like what I'm hearing." Briggs leaned back, folding his arms. She resisted. He muttered. The prosecutor arched a brow. The body camera tells a different story. Another wave of reaction rippled through the crowd. Briggs turned to the judge, his tone now more defensive. "I followed protocol." But Judge Kirkland wasn't convinced. He looked toward the bailiff. "Let's run the footage." A screen descended at the front of the courtroom, and a video began to play. Rene didn't turn to look. She'd lived every moment of it. Briggs shouting commands, her calm responses, the needless aggression, the arrogant way he cinched the cuffs. When the video ended, the courtroom remained completely silent. Judge Kirkland leaned in, hands pressed together thoughtfully. "Sergeant Briggs, you breached department policy. You made an unlawful arrest, and you omitted critical information in your initial report." Briggs parted his lips to speak, but the judge continued firmly. "All charges against Lieutenant Commander Dawson are hereby dismissed." His gavel struck the bench, a crisp, decisive sound. "I also recommend a formal internal review of Sergeant Briggs's conduct." The atmosphere broke, like a taut wire snapping. Briggs looked stunned, his face flushed with anger, fists tight at his sides. Rene simply released a slow, measured breath. She had never doubted the outcome. Rising to gather her belongings, she glanced over at Briggs once more. Their eyes locked, no words exchanged. None were necessary. This time, she wasn't the one fighting to clear her name. That was his battle now. Briggs stormed from the courtroom, his footsteps ringing out through the courthouse's glossy halls. His jaw was tight, his expression rigid. He could feel the stares from fellow officers, staff members, even members of the press who had gathered after the story spread. He wasn't used to this feeling. He was used to having the upper hand, to entering rooms with either authority or fear. Now, the influence he'd relied on felt like it was slipping away. Then came the moment he dreaded most. Sergeant Briggs. A sharp voice cut through the noise. He turned. Chief Eldon Baker stood nearby, arms crossed, face unreadable. Baker had served for over 3 decades, a figure of respect and power in the department. His opinions held weight. Briggs straightened. "Sir." Baker looked him over, then gave a slight nod. gesturing toward a private office. Once the door shut, his voice dropped. "What in the hell were you thinking?" Briggs let out a harsh breath. "I was doing my job." "Your job?" Baker scoffed, tossing a folder onto the desk. It landed with a solid thump. "That's not what it looks like from here. The body camera footage, the pattern in your arrests, and the fact that you didn't even know who you were taking into custody." Briggs's nostrils flared. "What does any of that have to do with it?" Baker leaned in, his voice low but cutting. "It has everything to do with it." He paused. "She wasn't just anyone. She's a high-ranking officer in the Navy. Did you think this would quietly go away?" Briggs turned his head jaw tight, grinding his teeth. "She was disrespectful. She challenged you." Baker interrupted. "That's not a crime." Briggs scoffed, shaking his head. "You don't get it. People like her." The chief's face turned cold. "People like what, Briggs?" Silence. Briggs swallowed but didn't speak. Baker rubbed his forehead and sighed. "The district attorney is re-examining every case you've touched in the last 5 years. You've been flagged for racial profiling. And let me make one thing very clear, this department won't fall because of you." Briggs's stomach knotted. "What does that mean?" Baker sat up straighter. "It means you're on immediate suspension, effective now. Internal Affairs is launching an investigation, and if what I suspect is confirmed—" He shook his head. "You're finished." The words landed like a blow. Briggs's face burned. "This is crap. Don't finish that thought." Baker snapped, his tone ice cold. "Clear out your things, and if you're smart, call a lawyer." Briggs stood frozen, fists clenched, his world collapsing piece by piece. For the first time, he understood he wasn't invincible. Meanwhile, across town, Renee sat alone in a quiet cafe, gently stirring her coffee as she scrolled through her phone. The headlines were already spreading. "Body cam footage goes viral." "Lieutenant Commander unlawfully detained. Officer under investigation." She wasn't surprised. From the moment she stepped out of her vehicle, she'd sensed how things might play out. She'd encountered men like Briggs before, entitled, smug, accustomed to twisting authority to suit themselves. But not this time. Her phone buzzed with a new message from her lawyer. "Briggs suspended. Charges possible." Renee brought the cup to her lips, took a slow sip, and smiled. "Good." She glanced out the window, watching the city carry on. The battle wasn't finished, not for her, and not for the others Briggs had likely harmed. But to date, it was a victory. The crisp afternoon breeze still carried the scent of fresh rainfall as Renee exited the cafe. The emotional toll of the last 24 hours should have weighed her down, but it didn't. She moved with the same assuredness she always had, head held high, stride steady. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she recognized the number. She let out a breath and picked up. "Captain, Lieutenant Commander," the familiar voice replied. "I assume you've seen the headlines." "I have." A short silence followed. "How are you holding up?" Renee glanced at her reflection in the glass of a nearby shop window. She saw strength, no signs of wear, no weakness. "I feel like I did exactly what I was meant to do." She answered. The captain's voice softened. "Exactly what I expected you to say." He paused. "The Department of Defense is looking into your situation. Don't be surprised if they ask you to speak publicly about it." Renee exhaled quietly through her nose. "Not sure I'm eager to become a headline." "You already are," the captain replied. "And whether you like it or not, your story speaks to something much larger." She was aware of that. She had always been. Briggs wasn't a rogue exception. He was a symptom of a system that had enabled men like him to act without oversight for too long. This wasn't just about her. It was for the countless others, maybe hundreds, who'd been in her position but lacked the rank, resources, or voice to push back. Renee leaned against a lamppost, watching the steady flow of traffic pass by. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened," she said. "And it won't be the last." "No," the captain agreed. "But it's the first time Briggs is being held accountable. And that's because you stood your ground. Renee closed her eyes briefly, letting his words settle into her. She hadn't given in, not when Briggs pulled her over, not when he tried to break her resolve, not when those cuffs bit into her wrists, not even during that long night in a holding cell, fully aware the odds weren't in her favor. She held firm, and now she had won. The captain cleared his throat. One more thing, he added. You might be hearing from the mayor's office. Renee's brow arched. Oh, seems they want to acknowledge how you handled everything with professionalism and grace. She smirked. Well, that's ironic. The captain chuckled. You planning to accept it? Renee thought for a second, then gave a casual shrug. I'll think about it. She ended the call and slipped her phone back into her pocket. Across the street, a mother walked hand in hand with her young son. He was giggling at something, his laughter light and full of joy. Renee watched them for a while. That was the future. She had fought for herself, yes, but also for him. For every black child who deserved to grow up in a world where men like Briggs could no longer use their badges as weapons. She inhaled deeply, then turned and walked away. Her steps were firm, her purpose clear. Because this battle had never been hers alone. Unchecked power is always abused, and the only way to fix a broken system is by holding it accountable. What happened to Renee happens every day to people who don't have military titles, who lack access, who have no clear proof to defend themselves. That's why it's critical to speak up, to demand reform, to refuse silence. If this story made you think, share it. If it made you angry, talk about it. And if it opened your eyes to the work ahead, stay involved. Because real change begins with real conversations.